Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to English language class. It's good to have you again. So, we have been looking at synonyms and antonyms, and that's still where we are, and that is what we'll still keep doing today. All right, so I'll quickly take us through what we did in the last class, that's on Monday. But before then, let's quickly look at this picture if we can all see it. All right. Okay. It's quite an interesting one. English language is very interesting. Yeah. All right. So we have two images and we have one word. Two images and one word. Now, if we are going to talk about these images, we would be right to say that the word we have in red describe both of these images. All right. So how can we now differentiate what these two images represent? So we talk about the word mad. We have been, if you've been attending class, you will know that this word keeps coming up. All right. And it's actually one of the words that have numerous meanings. And one of the things that we have looked at, or what some of the meanings that we have looked at from the previous classes, is that mad could mean angry or crazy. So if we are going to have to differentiate the two, we can see that both of them, both of the people in this picture do not look normal, right? They don't look normal. Okay. Now, they don't look normal, but they are not the same. One would still prefer one over the other. Okay. So if we can look at the image here, we can see that okay, this person looks a bit normal, like the appearance looks quite normal, but the way he's looking does not look like this person wants anyone to come close to them or anything. But if we look at this other person sitting on the floor, very unkempt, you can tell for sure by the appearance of this person that this person is definitely not normal. So, what would differentiate the two of those pictures is context. Context. All right. So, when we talk about context, as we've been looking at, because for synonyms and antonyms, we cannot, please mark that word, we cannot do without context. However way you want to choose your word, you cannot do without context, because this word will be coming up in sentences and you will need your context to determine the synonyms or the antonyms of the word you are asked to provide them for. So we talk about context, and that's what we have been looking at. So we are looking at synonyms, antonyms, and basically context. And then from the last class, what we started looking at, like I mentioned then, is the very interesting part of synonyms and antonyms, especially for people writing examination. And that is how to easily determine the meaning of difficult words, how to easily determine the meaning of difficult words. And we looked at 2 out of 5. I mentioned I'm going to be teaching us 5 tips on how to easily determine the meaning of difficult words. Right. So we looked at 2, and one of them is to break the word into smaller parts, breaking words into smaller parts. And this is where the issue of prefixes, roots, and suffixes come up. So that's for number one. Then the number two that we looked at is to use context clues. Use context clues. And this is where we talked about the sentences or the words around the particular word that help you understand the meaning of that word. So those are the two that we were able to look at from the 5 tips that I mentioned. So today we are going to be looking at the other three of the tips. All right. So if you're in class and you can hear me, kindly drop a thumbs up because we are going fully into today's class. All right. We're going fully into today's class. And we are going to be starting with the third one. The third, yeah, thank you. The third tip, we're looking at the third tip for determining or easily determining the meaning of a particular word. Because again, I mentioned in the last class that once it comes to examination, you already know that no one is going to give you simple words to deal with. No one will give you simple words to deal with. All right. So we are treating it as if you're already in exam class or you are seated for your examination. That's basically what we are doing. And from my examples, you will see that I'm not really using very simple words like what would be done in the normal setting of a classroom. We want to be real with ourselves. That's what we are doing. All right. So the third option or the third tip that we are looking at is to use word substitution. Using word substitution. All right, using word substitution. Again, we already looked at two. We looked at two tips out of five. So this is the third one. And the third one is to use word substitution. All right. So what does that mean? It means that you try to replace difficult words with another word that makes sense in the sentence. All right. So when you have a sentence and you're asked to choose the synonyms or the antonyms of that particular word, and you look at the word as a very difficult word, a word that you've not seen before, or you've not even heard before, or probably you've heard the word, but you don't even know what that word means. Okay. What you can use, one of the tips or one of the tricks that you can use is to substitute that big word for a simple word. Someone might be asking me, how can we substitute? If it is easy to substitute, do you think we will bother coming to class, or do you think we will bother listening to what synonyms and antonyms is about? Now I'm going to teach you a trick under this thing. So, like I said, you're going to be substituting that big word for a smaller word. All right, and we're going to be looking at some examples. As time permits us, we may do one or two examples. All right, so we're going to be looking at how to choose the right substitution word. How to choose the right substitution word. Again, this is under using word substitution. So this is you thinking of a simple word that could actually really that could fit into that word that you want to substitute. All right. So I have an example here, and the example says the teacher was meticulous in checking every detail of the report. The teacher was meticulous in checking every detail of the report. Now, the word that we are dealing with is meticulous, right? We are dealing with the word meticulous. So, how do we substitute? If the option we are looking at is to substitute, how do we substitute? All right. So, here is the example that we have. I'm trying to have that on the board so that we can all see it. Right. We're talking about the teacher being meticulous. Okay, so the sentence is the teacher was meticulous in checking every detail of the report. So the word is meticulous. So how do we substitute meticulous for a simpler word? Okay, maybe in your head you're trying to think, okay, what does meticulous mean? I think I've read meticulous from somewhere. I think I've read meticulous, but you can't figure out what that word really means. Now you need to choose a synonym or an antonym to replace this word. What do you do? Now you can have different options. Of course, in examinations, you're going to have four options and you're going to have to choose. And if you've been following, there were some things that I've mentioned to us that usually in your UTME or even WAEC, you're provided with four options. And in that four options, you have two that look alike and they look as if they are correct, while two of them you will know outrightly that they are incorrect. So you have to battle between two of them. And then the easiest way, or one of the easiest way to do these things is to rule out the two that are not correct first. Then you deal with the two that looks as if they are correct, and then you try to figure out which one is the correct one. All right. So for this, we are looking at the word to substitute. And again, I need to remind us that we are talking about context. All right, context. Okay, so to substitute, you need to think, looking at the sentence, the teacher was meticulous, right? The teacher was meticulous in checking every detail of the report. It was meticulous. Now, think. While thinking, while thinking, you are wondering, what is the teacher doing? The sentence says the teacher was meticulous in checking every detail of the report. Now you're thinking to yourself, what is the teacher doing? The teacher is checking something carefully. If you're checking every detail, do you know what it means to check every detail? You mean you know that you can get a piece of writing, you can get an article, and you're not really even checking all the details. You're just trying to scan through what the main gist is. But when it says you check through every detail, it means you notice all the dots, you notice all the punctuation, capitalization, etc. It takes a very careful person to check every detail of a particular report, especially if the report is not a very interesting one. I hope you get what I mean, right? So checking every detail of something, it takes someone who is very careful. So you're thinking to yourself, what is the teacher doing? The teacher is checking the detail of the report carefully. So that word carefully comes in. So what can you now substitute meticulous with? If you're following, kindly drop a thumbs up to be sure that you're in class. All right. So like I mentioned, you talk about the word meticulous and you want to substitute. You've thought to yourself, what is the teacher doing? The teacher is carefully checking the details of the report. So the word carefully comes in, or slighting. All right. So carefully. Now you want to look at substituting carefully for meticulous. Do you think it really goes? So we can now have what we call the teacher was careful, or the teacher carefully checked every detail of the report. That's one way. The other way, the teacher was careful in checking every detail of the report. Now, do not get lost. We talked about context, and the context is the words surrounding this word. So it means all of these words, we cannot isolate them to determine what this word is. So even though we need to substitute this word for a simpler word that we're very familiar with, you need your context to determine. So it's from the context of checking every detail that we came about this word carefully or careful. So you can easily substitute both of this word for meticulous. So you can have it as the teacher was carefully checking every detail of the report, or the teacher was careful in checking every detail of the report. That means you have successfully substituted meticulous or careful for meticulous. Do we get that? So that's like substituting. You have to think, and you are still thinking inside the box, because you already have a box which is your context, and the words in that box help you determine how you should go about the word that you are given. All right. So you can find the synonyms of meticulous, since we have replaced meticulous with careful or carefully. Now you can now think of the synonyms of careful. What else does careful means? Okay, it can mean to be thorough, or to be detailed, to be precise. Okay, synonyms for careful. So if you now have any of those words under the options provided to you, whether you find precise, you have thorough, you have detailed, or you have careful, then you already know what to go for, because already you substituted meticulous for careful or carefully, and then you can now decide what it means, and choose your synonym correctly. And in the case of antonyms, you can definitely say careless. Meticulous could mean careless, or sloppy, or inattentive. So if you find any of those options under, or any of those words under your option, you know what you are going for, because you already determine the meaning of meticulous by substituting it for careful or carefully. Okay, so that's for number three, tip three, of how to easily determine the meaning of big words. How to easily determine the meaning of big words. Now we are looking at number four. Number four. All right. And number four says to look for familiar words inside the word. Look for familiar words inside the word. All right. So you would agree with me that there are some big English words that you come across, even though you do not know the meaning of that big word, you will see a familiar word inside that big word. And then you're wondering, okay, this is a familiar word in this big word. Does it mean that from this familiar word I can determine what this big word means? Yes, you can. When you find a big word and you don't know what it means, and luckily you find a very familiar word in that big word, your meaning may not be far from that familiar word inside that big word. So this is another tip. So it says to look for familiar words inside the big word. Now, not all the words are familiar words inside big word. For example, we just looked at the word meticulous. And when you look at meticulous, you look at meticulous, you can't really find any familiar word. Then it means there's no familiar word inside that word. You can use another tip or another trick to determine what that word means. But if you can see some words and then you see a familiar word in it, you know that you can definitely use a trick for getting your familiar words, or giving a meaning to your familiar words, to determine that big word. So, like I said, yeah, I said sometimes a big word contains a smaller familiar word that gives a clue. Now, the smaller word will not tell you what that big word means. It's going to give you a clue. And if you know what it means to get a clue, it means you're not getting the answer, but you are getting hint to the answer. All right. So you are getting a clue to what the big word is, you are not getting the answer to the big word. So you have to be very careful. Once you find a familiar word inside a big word, you need to be careful. Determine what the familiar word is. What does the familiar word means? And then from there, you can proceed to knowing what the big word is. All right. So if we can have an example, if we have an example, and that example, we can use different example. For instance, you can use the word inexaminable. All right. When you see the word inexaminable, you can find a familiar word like exam. And once you know the meaning of exam, meaning to like inspect or examine rather, to inspect or to investigate carefully. Or you talk about even examination or exam, like that's the act of inspecting or analyzing something, basically. All right. So from there, you can now determine that what does inexaminable means. So when you find the word in, you can say, okay, in is the prefix, and the prefix usually means not. So not examinable. Not examinable, you can say it means not able to investigate, or impossible to examine, or impossible to investigate. All right, that's like a word there. But let's look at this example. Let's do this example. All right, I have an example, and it says our analytical approach to solving problems made her an excellent researcher. Our analytical approach to solving problems made her an excellent researcher. Again, I'm going to keep reminding us so that we do not forget that your context is very important. Do not for any reason leave out context when you are determining the meaning of a word, or when you want to provide the meaning, the synonyms of a word, or the antonyms of that word. All right. So this example, we're using it for looking for familiar words inside a bigger word. All right. So if we're looking for a familiar word, the word we're looking at is analytical. Analytical. Now, you want to look for a familiar word inside this word, and you're trying to figure it out. Okay, maybe you can't tell what this word means, but you're trying to figure out the familiar word in it. Because once you hear the word analytical, you're like, okay, I think I've heard something like this before. You can now bring words out of analytical. You can bring the word analysis, you can bring the word analyze, you can bring the word analyst from it. And then from there, you determine what's next. All right. So you can have, let's have it written down for analytical, your familiar words. You could have analyze or analyze. All right. American, British. All right. But in British, we can still use both of them. So analyze, you can use analysis. Okay. You can use analyst, and this could be your familiar word in this word analytical. So you're wondering, what does analyze mean? Okay, so you can say to examine in detail for understanding or interpretation. That's what it means to analyze. Okay, when you talk about analysis, what does it mean? The process of breaking down and examining something in detail. You just know that, okay, examining something in detail, that's what it means to analyze. And every of those words, analyze or analysis or analyst, already have something to do with examining or breaking something down so that you can understand in details. So when you now talk about analytical, you are wondering, how does this familiar word help you determine, or how does it give a clue to your big word analytical? So you look at context again, where it says our analytical approach to solving problems made her an excellent researcher. All right, so if to analyze means to examine in detail so that you can have an understanding of something, then our analytical approach could mean something related to it. Then you can now come about your meaning for analytical. All right, so that could mean the ability to think logically or to actually analyze problems. All right, so if you put that in this word, all right, analytical approach, that means she being able to examine and determine thoroughly so she could understand something. That approach in solving her problems made her an excellent researcher. So once you have an understanding of what that means already, you can now go ahead to determine what the synonyms is or what the synonyms are. But of course, since it's an exam, or you're definitely going to have to choose just one of them. So if you now see words like detailed, reasoning, systematic, logical, critical, you already know that this is what it means. This is the synonyms I can use for the word analytical. And if you are asked to choose the antonyms of the word analytical, you already know that, okay, analytical means the ability to think logically. So it means that the antonym for this word will include something like careless, because for someone to be analytical, it means the person is careful in details like researching or examining something. So if you say the word careless, irrational, illogical, you already know that these words are the antonyms for the word analytical. All right. Um, if you are still in class with me and you can understand what we are still doing, kindly drop a thumbs up. Whereas we are going to the last trick or the last tip under those 5 tricks of easily determining the meanings of difficult words. All right, so we're looking at the third one as I wipe off the board so we can have enough space for the rest. All right, so we're looking at the third point, the third point for today, and the fifth point that we have under this trick. All right, so this is the last one, and it says think of opposite words. Think of opposite words. Think of opposite words. All right. So someone is wondering, if I'm looking for synonyms, why should I look for the opposite word? Shouldn't there be another trick? Now I'm going to tell you why you need to look for the opposite word for you to get the meaning, whether you're looking for synonyms or you are looking for antonyms. Just think in the opposite word. So that word or that trick is to think of opposite words. So it says if a sentence shows contrast, that means, or the meaning of a difficult word may be the opposite of a familiar word. If a sentence shows contrast, the meaning of a difficult word may be the opposite of a familiar word. All right, so you're going to have to look for words showing contrast. And what does it mean to look for words showing contrast? It means you have to look for negative words When you talk about contrast, it means something negating another thing. Okay, so contrast, we are looking for words that negate. Okay, so words that negate or word showing contrast, like but, unlike. All right, so these are contrasting words. You could have some other like instead of, however, words that just show contrast. You already know. So if you find any word showing contrast in a sentence, we are still talking about context here. When you find a word showing contrast, that word is your context to determining what the word you are looking for is going to be. Okay, so these words will tell you one thing that is actually different or that is opposite to another thing right in that same sentence. Right in that same sentence. So I'm going to give you an example so that you can understand better. All right, so I have an example here, and it says, unlike the harsh winter, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. The balmy weather was warm and pleasant. Let's have that on the board. All right. I'm having an example on the board right now, and we have a contrasting word or a word that negates in the sentence. So, unlike the harsh weather, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. All right. So, the word we are dealing with right now is balmy. Okay. So, you're wondering, hey, which one is balmy again? So, unlike the harsh weather, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. Already, you can see your contrasting word unlike. So, unlike the harsh weather, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. How can you analyze this? So, you look at the word harsh. And why are you looking at the word harsh? Because you have a negating word here talking about the word harsh as against something else. So you're looking at the word harsh and you want to determine what the word harsh means in relation to weather, because of course we are talking about weather. You can see your pointer here as weather, and winter definitely talking about a season. All right, so you're looking at the word ash and you're wondering, what does ash mean? Okay, so ash could mean something very cold in relation to weather, or something difficult to deal with. All right, so for weather, you can talk about very cold, or generally maybe difficult to deal with. Do you know that these words do not mean just one thing? Sometimes they have like they have two meanings, three meanings, four, five. Sometimes some of them have many. You could find a word having like 10 different meanings. All right. So whichever one you can determine, of course you can. So we can talk about ash as unpleasant. All right. Unpleasant. It could also mean the word unpleasant. All right. Don't forget that the word we are looking at is balmy. All right. So unlike the ash winter, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. So since we find a word negating or word contrasting something and referring to this word ash, so unlike the ash winter, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. And we've been able to determine the meaning of the word ash as very cold in relation to weather, unpleasant, difficult to deal with, and all. So it means that the word that we are looking for the meaning, we are looking for maybe the synonym or the meaning of this word will mean the opposite of this. All right. So we've been able to determine ash winter. Unlike the ash winter, it means you're comparing something. You're comparing ash winter and balmy weather. All right. So since we have this word contrasting them, it means that ash, very cold, difficult to deal with, unpleasant, is the opposite of the word balmy. So, what can the opposite of these words mean, or the meaning or the opposite of the word ash, so that you can get the meaning of this? This is what I mean by thinking of the opposite word. All right. So, you are thinking of the opposite word of words that negate what you are looking for to determine the meaning of that word. All right, so we are now looking for the opposite of the word ash to determine the meaning of the word balmy. Okay, so if we've been able to determine this word, what does balmy not mean? All right, so it could mean warm. And of course, we even have the answer right here. And pleasant. Can we see that? So balmy, you can have balmy as warm. All right. So you have ash as very cold, and you have the opposite as warm. You can have mild, mild, the word mild. Okay. You can have pleasant. You can have comfortable. All right. To determine this. So, unlike the ash weather, the balmy weather was warm and pleasant. So, if you are asked to choose the synonym of this word, balmy, you have it underlined and you're asked, okay, look for the nearest in meaning to the underlined word. So, balmy weather, and you're wondering, okay, so if you find any of this word or something related to these words, you already know that this is your synonym to this word. And if you are asked to choose the antonym, maybe look for a word that is opposite in meaning to the underlined word. You just need to look for these words or the opposite of these words in that option or the options that you are given to determine what that word, that antonym of balmy would be. So you could have ash, you could have cold, you could have chilly. Okay, so this could be for synonyms. So for antonyms, you could have ash, you could have cold, you could have chilly. So if you find any of these words as part of your options, you already know that this is the antonym of the word balmy. Right. So um, this is the last point under the five that we mentioned. All right. So we're going to quickly look at the past question like we have been doing, something related to what we have done today, basically. All right. But before then, again, I'll quickly go through the five tricks. I call them tricks because normally you won't just see them, and then it's not something that easily comes to you. Okay, so you can call them tricks, you can call them tips. So far, they're going to help you determine the meaning of words and help you choose the appropriate synonym or antonym. All right, so how to easily determine the meaning of difficult words. We looked at five of them, and we have number one, breaking the word into smaller parts. Number two, using context clues. Number three, using word substitution. Number four, looking for familiar words inside the word. And number five, thinking of opposite word. Okay, so we're going to look at one past question, UTME past question, and this is from 2017. 2017. Okay, so I'm going to have to wipe off the board so I can paste the question and we can all see it. All right. Okay, so 2017, we have this question. It says, choose the option nearest in meaning to the word or phrase in italics. All right, this is actually not in italics, but for the sake of this class, I'm going to have to underline. Okay. All right, so the word we are looking for, doting. Choose the option nearest in meaning to the word or phrase in italics. And in our case, we have it on the line. So the children received gifts from doting parents. And we have options. We have A, we have nagging, we have loving, we have humble, and we have docile. Right. Now we want to choose, this is from 2017, 20 UTME 2017. All right. So we want to look for the synonym of this word, but we need to understand what it means first. So the first thing again that you really need to do is to think about context. Your context, you can't do without the words that you have here. You cannot do without them. You need these words to determine what this word really means. So from the 5 tricks or the 5 tips that we have looked at, which one can easily work for this question? Because not all trick can work for them. Okay, remember that in one you have to use context clues, in another one you have to break words into syllables, in another one you have to think of the opposite, in another one you have to use word substitution. So you just need to think quickly which one is going to work. In some cases all of the 5 tricks may work, in some cases 2 of the tricks may work, in some cases only one will work, and in some cases you may find some tricks that may not work for them, because there are some questions like that there's nothing you want to do, you just need to know the answer. So these tricks are just for majority, let's say about 90% of the questions that you're going to meet with. But for like the 10% of them, you need to sort them out on your own. All right, um so we are going to, for this one, there are different options that we can use, but we're going to use um, word substitution, word substitution to solve it. All right. So in this case, you just need to substitute your options for this and see which one actually really matches. Okay. And again, do not forget that we are talking about context. Context. And context will help you to substitute this word very well so that you can choose your appropriate answer. All right. So if you look at option 1, you want to determine the correct meaning for doting and you want to look for a word to substitute doting. All right. So if you substitute doting for nagging parents, that's option number 1. You say the children received gifts from nagging parents. Does it make sense? In context, does it make sense? It doesn't make sense because nagging means complaining or scolding. And then when you look at the context, you need to look at talking about parents giving gifts, children receiving gifts. If you are giving gift to someone, it means you're a compassionate person. It means that you're someone that care. You are an affectionate person. All right. So if you now substitute nagging for doting, you will see that it doesn't make sense. All right. So nagging doesn't make sense because it means complaining and scolding. You cannot receive gift from a parent that is complaining about you or scolding you. Okay, now you move to the next one. The children received gift from loving parents. The children receive gift from loving parents. Does it make sense? Because loving parents are, of course, caring and affectionate. And if you are loving, it means that you can give gifts, you can see something that someone likes, and then you want to give it to that person. Does it make sense? Yes, it makes sense. You look at the third option. The children receive gifts from humble parents. Does it fit? Humble actually means being modest or not, but not necessarily affectionate. So being modest doesn't mean that you are affectionate. You could be humble and not affectionate, right? So it doesn't fit in this context. You move to the next one. The children receive gifts from docile parents. Does it fit? Okay, so docile itself means quiet and obedient. Yes, quiet, obedient, but not affectionate. So children received gift from quiet and obedient parents. Does it really fit as against one option that we have seen that actually makes sense? The children receive gifts from loving parents. Okay, so while substituting doting for all of these options, we see that okay, this doesn't really work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, and this is like the option that you have. So it means that the nearest in meaning to the word or the phrase that we have here is loving. Because all of these ones, after substituting them, we found that they could not really fit. All right. So, like I mentioned, this is from 2017 UTME. The nearest, there's usually the session for nearest in meaning and opposite in meaning. Just locate them and see what you can do with them using all of those 5 tricks that we have learned from Monday till this point to see how far you can go with them. All right. So for this, the correct answer we have is loving because these appropriately substitute these so we are able to determine the meaning of dirty. So we come to the end of the class today, and I'll see you in class on Friday, same time by 4. All right. So you're going to have to, if in case you miss any part of this class, of course you can always find the video on YouTube at A1 Tutor. All right. So do well to go over them. Even if you attended the class, you can also go to YouTube to see or go over what we've done again. All right. So the next class that you are going to be having is mathematics. All right. So in the next 10 minutes, get ready for your class. All right. See you on Friday. Bye bye.